The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar in Hatfield, offering personalized solar energy solutions and ongoing customer care, proudly serving communities throughout the Pioneer Valley. Northeast-solar.com.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Later in the show, we'll head to Lanesboro to check out the wandering chickens, cows, and more of Square Roots Farm.
And Mr. Universe Kainat Studios and Hampshire College's Salman Hamid explores the latest celluloid voice version of the very first sci-fi novel, Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein.
But first, another city with its mayoral seat on the line, North Adams, home to Mass College of Liberal Arts and Mass MoCA, is looking to elect a leader this November.
And today we sit with the first of the two candidates, incumbent Mayor Jennifer Maxey.
I feel a little bit like we've been called to the principal's office because we're in the mayor's office in the city of North Adams, Massachusetts, with Mayor Jennifer Maxey, who was born, raised, and educated and has worked in North Adams virtually her whole life. She's the first woman to serve as mayor.
She says her extensive experience in municipal government and education has prepared her to continue to tackle the difficult tasks as mayor.
She took office in 2022 and is running for her third term as mayor. Welcome back to the Fabulous 413, Mayor Maxey.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my privilege to be here with you today and to want to continue to serve the city of North Adams. As you both know, I'm not one for radio shows or interviews, but I find in this job that I'm getting a little more comfortable. So I'm so thrilled to have you back. So thanks for reaching out to me. What do you want to know?
Yeah.
Why do I want to keep going?
Yeah, well, that's a great first question. We'll let you interview yourself.
Yes. Okay, great. I'm always a self-starter, take control kind of lady. Basically, I love North Adams. As you know, I was born and raised here, and I have a big commitment to seeing North Adams succeed. People say to me, Jen, you're crazy being mayor. You could be teaching accounting somewhere on a beach in Hawaii, and here you are.
You do have a sign in your office that says, "Ooh, this calls for a spreadsheet," which kind of shows, I think, some of your psychology.
Yes. I love North Adams, and my family is here. And as I've had opportunities to go elsewhere, I realize how great of a career path I've had here. And why I keep going is, again, that passion to move North Adams forward. I was born and raised here, but I also grew my career here, starting with the city of North Adams in 1992, working at the landfill. Actually, it was a dump at the time before we converted it to a transfer station. And I've been very lucky to have different positions, so that prepares me well to lead the city. And I still have a lot of work to do. When I came back to City Hall 4 years ago, almost 4 years ago, it doesn't seem possible, we had a lot of problems. We still have problems, but we're hitting them head on every day with purpose and intention. People will say, you haven't done enough in 4 years. Well, we've secured close to $44 million in grant funding to help us do a lot of those infrastructure projects, a lot of things to include moving our police department forward, a lot of equipment grants. Our Council on Aging, we've invested close to $1 million in our Council on Aging. But what makes me keep going? It's the drive to make North Adams better. And I realize, you can't do this job alone. You have to be a collaborator. You have to work with the community. And that's what I love doing. My critics always say, I'm looking for a photo op. I hate to have my picture taken. What I love is to be out in the community, listening, learning, and then taking that back and building projects and helping people. So that's why I continue. I still have the desire to help people.
You, as you've mentioned, have been mayor now for 4 years. You worked for the Mayor Barrett, right? Who was mayor for the longest serving mayor of the city of North Adams, I think for 26 years or something like that.
Yeah, so I worked for Mayor Barrett for 16 years. I left, I think, in 2008 and went to MCLA and then Southern Vermont College. And then I was the assistant superintendent for the North Berkshire School Union. So I pretty much have 16 years of municipal experience plus we'll say 4 years as mayor, so 20 years of municipal experience. And then I have about probably another 15 in education, mostly in higher ed. But I'm only 27, so you can do the math there.
Nice. You were a baby when this all started. And it's an interesting juxtaposition because your opponent, who we'll talk to on tomorrow's show, has only been living in town for 2 years. So there might be some that would say, you know this town inside and out, you've worked here forever. And then there might be others who would say, you know this town and worked here forever, but things aren't progressing in the way that they want to see it going. It's time for some new, fresh perspectives. Tell us about why you don't think he should be mayor and that you should continue having such a long legacy in the town of North Adams.
Well, I first want to say that I applaud anyone and respect anyone who puts their name on a ballot. That's a tough thing to do, and especially a reach from a new person on the scene to go from moving here maybe 2 years ago to wanting to be mayor. So I give him credit for that. Maybe that's the only thing. But I just want to lay down our resumes and look at our background and look at our education and look at our purpose and the things that we've done. When people say nothing's happening in North Adams, well, we've had a lot of growth. Look at Greylock Works, look at tourists, look at the porches. We're going to have a new school, the Greylock School Project. That was a huge undertaking, but we got a $42 million grant for that. Yes, it was hard for some of the taxpayers. Yes, there was a fight, but the ultimate decision was made by the taxpayers. I only laid the path, made the vision, and the people voted, and they voted in favor. So when you say about progress, I mean, we got 2 bridge projects going on. We have a upcoming huge project coming up on the Ashland Street corridors. We're fixing things. You can't fix it all at once, folks. And then when we look at public safety, I've invested in public safety. So when you look at what's changing and what's not changing, we're growing. It's just a different North Adams than it was 80 years ago. And we are very business friendly. So when those people say nothing's happening, we're very operationally focused. And we're also very focused on the creative economy. You know, last time we met at Mass MoCA. That's a big piece of our community. And where would we be without Mass MoCA? It's not the save all, but it certainly is a big aspect of our community. And we're bringing in more people, specifically around the artist community, who want to live here, raise their kids, and work here. And that's growth. It might look different than when it was the Sprague Electrics or the Roberts companies of the world, but it's still growth. I have a very strong operational sense. I can wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and manage a fire scene. I can wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and manage a water main break when we're managing a fire scene. So I have a good vision of and a good operational plan of what happens. You know, people don't understand that when we have a fire, it affects our water system. When we have a water main break, it impedes our fire. When we have a huge drug bust, that affects sometimes our bus lines. I'm able to control all of that. Not control, but I'm able to coordinate all that. And people are like, that's not the mayor's job. But I do take the role of incident command because that's my background. Having worked on a college campus, having worked here throughout the city, it's not just a paperwork job where you sit behind the desk and you smile and wave at the camera. I'm a hands-on mayor. I kind of fill in positions that we don't have. Something so simple as a communications director. We don't have a communications director. I put out those press releases. Do I need to be a little bit better at it? Of course. But I'm hands-on, and I know that the city needs a working mayor, not someone that's just here for the photo op.
In looking at some of the articles and debates, it seems like maybe City Hall has a little bit of a staffing issue. Is that something that in this next administration you're looking at trying to build your teams out in a way that might cover some of those gaps that are there currently?
So as far as staffing issues, we were pretty bare bones when I came back to City Hall. We've never had a communications director, but our administrative officer kind of took that role. In the last year, I've had 4 major retirements. Change in my treasurer, change in my community development director, change in my superintendent, and a longtime clerk in the treasurer's office. And I don't see it as a staffing problem. I see it as an opportunity to bring new people in. We were very fortunate to be able to promote within the ranks in a couple of positions, most of the positions actually. But communication is key. And social media, while it can be very powerful and helpful, is a detriment. And it's a detriment if you can't stay ahead of it and stay ahead of the negativity. And that's a problem for us because we have a group of people who we sneeze and they think we're doing something wrong. I try very hard to communicate my plans through city council meetings and the sporadic press releases and talking with the press. But that is something with the new world of technology that I think all municipalities need to get up to speed on. And yeah, are we a little bit behind because we don't have a said communications director? And that certainly is a goal for the upcoming years to improve. But we're more concerned about filling police and fire, highway department, people in the trenches who actually churn the work. Those are the number one people that I'm focused on right now. And so that's why I sometimes most of the time, take on incident command of large things going on in the city. Where we really need to invest in is in our community and communications. There's been a lot of talk about ADA managers and things like that. We're chipping away at it, but we've always had an ADA coordinator, but not to the level of what the standard is. And I recognize that. I'm not going to say that I don't. I recognize that. But even when Mr. Berglund says that I've forgotten about our elderly, which I kind of laugh at because I care for my 94-year-old mother and we've invested all that money in the Council on Aging and I actually love older people, and that we've forgotten about ADA compliance. We redid the walkway down here at City Hall. We've put in buttons in the building. We're making sure that we have adequate parking, and we're doing a huge sidewalk project down near Blackington and the college area. And then we have the Ashland Street corridors. We're putting in sidewalks on the hills, Jackson Street, Hudson Herman, and all of those areas. So we're chipping away at it, but the question is nobody's done anything in the last, say 30 years. And we recognize that. And anytime we have an opportunity to reach for a grant, that we do. That's why one of our new positions is the Grants and Procurement Officer, which we've moved some people around and had different people in those positions just because they've evolved and they've moved up, which I think is showing growth in municipal work. But we have a very bright individual in that position now, and all he does is look for money for us. And with the retirement of Michael Newvalley in community development, I call him the $1 million man. He can just find money. He's training with this person and also grooming the new community development director. So we're doing all the right things. It just unfortunately takes time. And what people don't understand is you can't just go out and rip up all those sidewalks and hire J.H. Maximilian. There's a procurement process, and there are things that we have to do to prepare for that. So our job is we're getting projects what we call shovel ready. And we're seeing that, for example, with the Notch Reservoir and the Mount Williams Reservoir. We know they're in disrepair. They've been in disrepair for years. We received a grant that is helping us evaluate and engineer what the fixes will be. Then we get that data and we apply for the next round of grant to fix them. And what my focus is being very sensitive to what grant opportunities we can secure that will help us do projects but not put the burden on the taxpayers. And that's what we do. And it's called forecasting, it's called planning, it's called strategic. It's using the infamous capital plan, which my opponent says I don't have, even though there's a word draft. We have plans, but really it comes down to the good almighty dollar. And how do we spread that dollar across the city and focus on all aspects of the city?
We're speaking with the mayor of North Adams, Jennifer Maxey, who is running for re-election on Tuesday, November 4th. You're running against Scott Berglund, who we'll talk to on tomorrow's show. And he has leveled a bunch of accusations at your time in office and some of the ways that you've handled things. There was a debate. Shout out to iBerkshires.com for putting together an excellent debate, and Berkshire Eagle for covering this campaign and giving us a lot of resources to draw from. But the Notch Reservoir and the logging situation there is the main impetus for your opponent for getting into the race. And I'm sure we'll talk to him about his perspective on this tomorrow, but he has said that there were going to be dangerous chemicals used. Let's talk about your perspective on what happened with the Notch Reservoir.
So the project started out as a conceptual project of what could be, and it got legs. And I think it showed really, despite the friction, really good community spirit in the end. It got legs in the sense that about the herbicides. And the minute we heard that and we heard the response, we weren't set in stone that that's what we were going to do. We said, okay, done. We're going to go to mechanical harvesting. So that was addressed really early on in the plan. And then as time went on and we got into the forest cutting and do you cut the trees, do you save the trees, do you just let them be natural in the forest, it became very evident to me that we really weren't looking at all the angles and the impact on the people who actually use the forest and the trails. We were looking at it from the watershed perspective. Now, let me just be very clear. I had no intent, and nor have I, poisoned the watershed. Mm-hmm. I can't even mix my cup of coffee, never mind figure out how to poison a watershed, nor would I. So that accusation or implication that that was my intent, I can't say it on radio, is ridiculous. We'll leave it at that. It was a testament of listening to people. Now, I got inundated with emails. Never knew Scott Berglund's name in any of those emails. I actually had my IT department search. I never knew him through this project. I never met him. He was not a frontliner, let's put it that way. But I listened, and I met with people like Dr. Muma, who was being referenced, and I met with the Natural Resources Council, and I met with the protesters who were on my front lawn, and I listened, and it just didn't feel right. Now, with that being said, we do have culvert issues. We do have to address parking. We do have to address some of the natural resources. But the way the project was rolled out and the legs that it got distorted from what the purpose was. And the purpose was to sustain the watershed and sustain the forest. So I paused it. I stopped the project and said, look, there's still too many questions. There's still too much angst in the community. And I got a really nice chainsaw out of it because somebody mailed me a chainsaw.
I wondered why you had a chainsaw in your office.
Yeah, I never cut down a tree, but I think that was an indication that they thought I was cutting trees. We never cut a tree down. So you have this social media flash that the city's cutting trees and the city's doing that. Well, come to find out, it was the state of Massachusetts on the DCR property that were cutting trees. It had nothing to do with us, but we get the bad rap because we had a project in play. We do have to revisit that. I've met with a couple of the groups, a couple of the individuals that were very passionate about stopping the project. I see what they're talking about. And I still wasn't convinced about the forestry plan and what we were cutting and what we weren't cutting. And then why would I go through if I don't even really get it? So I listen to the community. So when they say that I don't listen, I might not outwardly listen, but I take it all in and then form an action plan. And the action was to pause the project. To say Mr. Berglund led the charge, I don't recall ever seeing him or interacting with him, but there were a lot of passionate people about that. And if that's what he wants to put a feather in his cap on, okay.
And just to be clear, there has been no cutting?
No cutting.
And no chemicals?
No chemicals, no cutting, no
Just
mechanical.
a pause when all that stuff was
Done.
proposed. Yeah.
Mass Audubon and everybody went away. It's not over, but the question is what really needs to be done. I think we all needed like a little time out to kind of back up from the project, regroup, refresh. And, in the winter, I'll kind of call those people back in and say, okay, here we are. I have a folder on my desk, which I look at quite a bit. There are a lot of knowledgeable people in this community about natural resources. And I was so amazed that I had this think tank and I didn't even know. So when people say it was a controversial project, I think it had an end result of honestly bringing me to people that I had never connected to and that have never really connected with me. So that was the positive of the negative. But I certainly would never harm this community.
We're speaking with the mayor of North Adams, Jennifer Maxey, who is running for re-election on Tuesday, November 4th.
I just have a comment that a chainsaw is a very expensive, kind of ridiculous protest gift.
Yeah.
It's a kid's chainsaw and it lights up.
Why are there child's oh wait.
Is it a toy chainsaw?
Yes, it's
Oh,
a toy
okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
Like, why are they making chainsaws for
Run
children?
around with it on Halloween and
America's gone wild.
scare the kids.
No.
Another one of the critiques from your opponent is a lack of transparency. What could you do better to be more transparent? Do you feel like you lack transparency?
I feel I'm transparent.
I can see through you right now.
Yeah. How do I look?
You look like a ghost.
I am guilty of holding things close to my vest. So for example, if we apply for a grant to redo the lights on Main Street, I'm not going to talk about that until I get the money and it becomes real. And then people say, well, we didn't know you applied for the grant. Well, I don't want to get people's expectations up if we don't get funded. 9 times out of 10, we get funded. In fact, we're sitting on $4 million of one-stop announcements that we can't talk about yet, but it's coming. And we're excited about that. So could that be I'm not being transparent? No, there's a time and a place, and that is strategy. I think people say that I'm not transparent because they don't like the answer sometimes. And part of this job is saying no. Do I think we can improve on making my updates at City Council more robust? Certainly. Can we improve on getting more press releases out? Certainly. Can we do discussions like this more often with the local media? Absolutely. But you get bogged down every day just doing the job. And in my world, I'm the elected Chief Executive Officer of the city, and you've empowered me and given me the responsibility to run the city, and that's what I do. And in some cases, I just do it naturally. I don't feel I should have to run to the general public every time I want to cut down a tree branch right here outside my office. I don't think they're talking about that. I think they're talking about when projects come to life, they've missed the front end. 9 times out of 10 on most of our projects, we have public hearings, for example, in community development, and we get the same 3 people every year. So my hope is we can work on building that robust population to come in and learn as we're building some of these things. But ask me a question and I'll give you an answer.
I mean, one of his critiques in the debate that iBerkshire's held was that, people are calling City Hall and that you're not answering or screening the phone calls. Is that true to your assessment?
No, what happens is people call, and if it's a public service issue, they get sent to public services. If they're calling directly for me, I get that. But some people call every single day, get an answer, and don't like the answer, so they call back tomorrow and want to see if they can get a different answer. And there are some things that we're facing currently that are really civil issues between landlords and tenants or property owners or abutters that are between them that really don't have a city compliance piece, and people get upset. People think that we can just go into houses and tell people to stop smoking pot because it's bothering your neighbor. We can't. So I think, yes, I could report out more, but I hold things close to the vest until I'm ready to execute.
In that debate, you mentioned that you don't want to be a landlord. The nation has a housing problem, and public housing is an effective way to combat on an affordability level. Why don't you want the office to have public housing in that way?
That statement is not so much around public housing. It's about us owning property and trying to maintain property, for example, the Windsor Mill, and renting it out and not really being able to upkeep it the way we should. It's about sitting on houses too long that we foreclosed on when we could really flip them and put them back on the tax rolls. I don't want to be a landlord. I don't want to run public housing, but I'm willing to partner with an entity to get that in our community. And we floated the idea with Windsor Mill about should it be our public safety complex, or now with the Affordable Housing Trust, which we've just established, can we target that and work with maybe a private investor to make it housing? I'm not opposed to public housing, but that really isn't our function unless we have the funding to build out a whole separate division within the city. The resources we have in our building department and in our inspection services are maxed as it is. We would have to build out a whole separate component, which I don't feel should be in our portfolio. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be the leader in helping with the public housing crisis, but we're not going to be the investor. However, if there is an opportunity for grant funding or state or federal funding, we certainly would be the number one chomping at the bit to get that. But we would have to partner with someone to run that kind of complex. I'll also use Brayton Elementary as an example. When Greylock School is built, we'll move the kids out of Brayton Elementary. And what are we going to do with that? And, we are exploring a housing option over there. But we wouldn't do it. We would have to partner, similar to what we're doing with Sullivan School and Mass MoCA and the artist community that they'd like to build out up there. That's what we would do. We would work with people and then help build it out and then put it back on the tax rolls.
Your opponent, Scott Berglund, has suggested that entities like Mass MoCA contribute to the city. There is a whole kind of payment in lieu of taxes situation that some cities have a relationship with big businesses or big nonprofits. Maybe, say Smith College, so once in a while will grant the city of Northampton some money that they don't have to pay, but that they do pay. What do you think about that going forward?
We are in the process of doing an evaluation through our Distressed Communities grant that will advance the whole pilot process.
Payment in lieu of taxes.
Payment in lieu of taxes. Mass MoCA and MCLA provide a lot of in-kind services for us. To say, hey, Mass MoCA, hey, MCLA, can you build me a new fire station? They're not in the position like Williams College is.
Which did happen in Williamstown,
Correct.
just down the street.
And please note, I've asked their president if she wanted to build me a fire station, and she smiles at me. But you have to be strategic. And right now, with the economy the way it is and everything that's going on in the federal government, it's not the right time to ask people. I mean, our BCAC for fuel assistance is struggling, the food pantry. We don't know where the cuts are going to end on the federal side for these nonprofits. They don't have a lot of money. That's why they're nonprofits. We need to focus on growing communities. We need to focus on bringing more businesses here. We need to focus on filling all of our houses and all of our empty land. We get what we can in-kind services from these nonprofits, which doesn't help the bottom line, but they do a lot of work and a lot of good work in this community, and there's a value to it. You can't put $1 million on it, but it's worth $1 million, if that makes any sense. That is not a sustainable philosophy. Ask the nonprofits and you'll be fine. They'll build you a building. They may sponsor a room, but I don't foresee any of our nonprofits being able to build me a fire station.
I mean, it's in the name, not profits. They don't have profits. So we talked to you 2 years ago, and in going with the idea that like the speed of government is very, very slow, has there been any movement to change the term time for mayor in North Adams? Because 2 years is not a lot of time to get anything done.
Exactly. I don't even look at it as a term limit. I just keep working. That's all I want to do is work, and then, oh, poof, it's time to campaign again. There has been some conversations, and I believe there was a petition started to focus on opening the charter. When you open the charter specifically for the 4-year term, you open the whole charter. So I don't believe that petition was returned. But there is a lot of conversation. If you go to the Massachusetts Mayors Association website, you can see there's very few of us that still have 2-year terms. That is something that if the community wants, the community has to drive. I don't think it's appropriate for me as mayor to drive that because it just looks like I'm extending my contract. I certainly would be interested in a 4-year term. But I look at it every 2 years. I have to be evaluated and go before the largest search committee of my life, and that's what I do. That's how I look at it.
Last time we spoke, we were talking about the Mohawk Theater, which is right down the street from downtown. Gorgeous marquee that I believe the city invested in having restored. It is owned by the city currently, and there are some ideas about what might happen there, including potentially some housing in the upper floors of the theater. Where does that stand? 2 years since we last talked about this. Yeah. Where is it now, and what's the potential going forward if you were to continue as mayor?
We put an RFP out, a request for proposal. It was not a contract, by the way, Mr. Burton.
Which was brought up in the debate, that we said a canceled contract?
Yes. So the canceled contract question was a spinoff of the Bernard administration. I didn't accept the proposal when I became mayor almost 4 years ago to sell it for whatever amount of money because I felt it wasn't enough. Then we, the Maxey administration, put out an RFP. We showed it probably, 10, 15 times to people. Thought we were going to get a proposal for a multi-purpose type of venue and got none, 0, which was disappointing, but it had a lot to do with timing of people with other projects and the cost of construction and the amount of money that needed to be put into the theater. So we have been sitting on it. However, we recently will be awarded a $50,000 technical assistant grant to kind of frame out a business plan around the Mohawk Theater. We also have some earmarks in the pipeline that will help us maybe draw out and expand what we want there. Initially, I have to say, I was like, oh, we got to sell it. We're not in the business to run a multi-purpose performing arts center. But I really believe in collaboration and partnership. And I think if we find the right partner and we have the right plan, then we can make it multi-purpose. And what I mean by that is on a Wednesday afternoon, we can host the Massachusetts Mayors Association in there. On Thursday night, we can have a comedian. On Friday night, we can have a band land that may not be big enough for the Mass MoCA stage, or we can collaborate with the Adams Theater. What Nina Moore is doing in Adams is absolutely fantastic, and I want to mirror what she does, but I don't want to compete with her. I want to complement her work. And then build income in the building by having condos upstairs. The space in that place is remarkable. So we haven't found the right chemistry yet. And as we find that, it may look like we're not doing anything with the Mohawk. We're showing it quite a bit. Anyone who's interested, we take a tour. We're looking for the right combination. And we haven't quite found it yet. And I'm not giving it away because I don't want it to turn into a piece of a hotel or something that isn't going to help the city. And, you know, it really reflects a lot of our past. We all have history of going there and watching movies. I'd love to have it open on a Sunday afternoon for the kids to have a matinee or something. But it's got to be a useful purpose. It just can't be open 3 nights a week. So we have to be able to fill it, market it, and support it. And I think it's going to be a combination of private, public, and some nonprofit funds. Flip side is, and I'll be criticized for this, and I say this to you with a smile on my face, you can't see this on the radio. This week, we're hosting our 2nd annual haunted house in the Mohawk Theater. We'll bring in close to 600 people. We're using it. Is it an appropriate use? Probably not, according to my critics, but it's an opportunity for us to provide a community service in a building that was built for the community, and we can do that. And this is sponsored by a grant that we received called Striving Communities. It's a public safety grant, and it's starting to build momentum. And it might be minor, and it might be one day, but people talk about it all year long. We want to build that another 364 days a year, and that's what we're looking for. You know, I can go back to when I was in high school, you know, listening to my aunt sing at the Mohawk Theater and getting a standing ovation. And then I can remember seeing Jaws for the first time. So building those kind of experiences is what our focus is. But I have to be sensitive to what is the city's financial commitment to that. And right now our financial commitment is to infrastructure and education and a public safety, of course. But it's not forgotten. It's just building the right recipe for it.
Mayor Jennifer Maxey, running for re-election for the city of North Adams. Thanks so much for taking so much time to talk with us today.
Thank you so much.
Good luck on Election Day.
Thank you.
We'll chat with Mayor Maxey's opponent in this mayoral race, Scott Berglund, on tomorrow's show.
We'll head to Lanesboro to hear about a farm finding that livestock is the perfect match for the mountains of the Berkshires and meet Michael Gallagher of Square Roots Farm.
But that'll be after we see the first sci-fi novel in its newest film iteration with Mr. Universe Salman Hamid.
You're listening to The Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass 5 College Credit Union, dedicated to creating access to financial well-being for local people, businesses, and communities. Insured by NCUA, umass5.coop. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Real Pickles, a worker-owned cooperative in Greenfield, producing organic fermented vegetables sourced from Northeast farms. More information at realpickles.com.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
We're skipping astronomy today at the kitchen table of Hampshire College astronomer Dr. Salman Hamid, Mr. Universe, who wears another hat as a board member of Amherst Cinema, and there's some really exciting stuff happening at Amherst Cinema right now and this week. I've mentioned on the show before that my mother is dying, so we are in this era where people say the veil is the thinnest, and what is the better thing to do to help navigate through these trying things that we as human beings experience rather than immerse yourself in the world of fiction and science fiction. So I literally left my mother's dying bedside in Wrentham, Massachusetts, when she fell asleep, and drove 2 hours to see the 9:30 showing at Amherst Cinema on opening night of Guillermo del Toro's new rendition of Frankenstein. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Well, sorry to hear about your mother.
We're going to hear about this a lot until the time comes, and then probably after that too.
And it's always tough, and that's what good literature does. I mean, literature allows you to put words to those feelings and also how do you think about those, interpret those? And yeah, it is always tricky. My father passed away just last month in September, so death is always it's a certainty. I don't want to bring up taxes because it's unclear whether taxes are certain or not for certain people, but death is certain for everybody.
And Frankenstein, of course, is the first science fiction novel by most accounts, written by a teenage Mary Shelley who grew up raised by an atheist father and a feminist mother, and was an outcast herself, became enamored with the famous writer Percy Shelley. They had a tumultuous, tempestuous, and open relationship. And the story goes that the Lord Byron, the famous poet, challenged at this gathering Shelley and Mary Shelley and himself and others who were at this gathering to write a ghost story. And what Mary Shelley comes up with is, by all accounts, the first science fiction novel of all time.
Yeah, and this is 1818. Actually, 1816 was when this particular event happened, as you mentioned, and that, interestingly, has something to do with a volcano, because there was a volcano in Indonesia, Mount Tambora, which actually exploded or spew out ashes, and it covered the entire globe. And because of that, there was a lot more rain during 1816, and sometimes it's called sort of like, the year of no sun. And because of that, these folks, Lord Byron, he had a place in Switzerland around Lake Geneva, and they didn't have much to do. So, the TV choices were limited, I guess.
Right? It wasn't the golden age of television yet.
So he challenged, let's come up with a ghost story. And there was another person there as well, John William Polidori, who was his personal physician. And he was very young too. I think he was like 21 or something like that. He knew about a lot of medical advances that were going on at the time. And they all wrote, Lord Byron wrote parts of a poem. Polidori wrote a small story called Vampire, which actually 70 years later became the inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula. So again, coming from the same
gathering of minds.
And of course, Mary Shelley's, at that time, she was not Shelley yet because she had not married Percy Shelley yet. But her story then turned into a novel 2 years later because they all heard that story and it was like, whoa, turn it into a novel, and she did, and that became Frankenstein, a modern Prometheus. The original title has Frankenstein, a modern Prometheus, and of course Prometheus, the legend of the Greek god stealing fire from the gods and giving it to humans. Of course, that's part of the story and part of this mythology.
And it was published anonymously, A, because it was by a woman, and B, because it was scandalous at the time to insinuate that anything other than God could bestow life. Then it became hugely successful even in its time and was republished, I think, about 15, 20 years later with her actual name and her accreditation. But it has been interpreted many, many times in the world of film, and now it has been reinterpreted by the, I think, excellent filmmaker Guillermo del Toro. You have also seen the new rendition of Frankenstein at Amherst Cinema, which you have only a few more days to see because Netflix made this movie and they want you to watch it on Netflix, but they want it to win Oscars, so it has to go to movie theaters. They only put it in movie theaters, I think, for a week.
This is a big screen film. And Guillermo del Toro, I mean, the cinematography is amazing, and we are not going to be giving spoilers because this novel was published in 1818.
You had 200 years
that's
to
correct.
Get your mind wrapped around what happened.
And you should read the book because the book is fantastic.
I remember reading the book the first time and being blown away.
Because most of the films don't actually go to the most interesting parts of the book.
Yeah.
They focus more on the horror parts, which actually is not the interesting part, because the interesting part is about the monster and how he develops intelligence and other types of things, which this movie, by the way, does. This movie is closer to the book. The movie starts and the book starts close to the North Pole, and it's beautifully shot. Guillermo del Toro knows what to do with monsters as well. I mean, of course, if you, hopefully you have seen it, but if you haven't, see Pan's Labyrinth or Shape of Water, and also his wonderful stop motion Pinocchio.
I can't believe how good that one is, too.
He is really excellent. So this is one of those films, if you have an opportunity, see it on the big screen. If you are in the area, go to Amherst Cinema. It's not playing at any other place here. But otherwise, it is going to be on Netflix, and see it because it is really fantastic. But this is a very particular take by Guillermo del Toro, and he actually makes it his own.
Tell us about what your thoughts are and the science that both Mary Shelley puts in the book and its exploration of science and the Jurassic Park question.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they didn't stop to think if they should.
This is something that is wrestled with in both the book and the new Guillermo del Toro movie, which Oscar Isaac, I think he's a fantastic Dr. Frankenstein. Christoph Waltz is always amazing. Mia Goth, her accent was a little bit off for me at the beginning, but I grew to love it and thought she was great. What's your take on the exploration of science in this new one?
I would distinguish it a little bit. The reason why the book Frankenstein is considered the first science fiction, and there are a lot of debates about what is science fiction and what is fantasy, for example, and how do you distinguish that. But in Frankenstein, because of Mary Shelley's own training and her father and her mother, although her mother, by the way, died soon after giving birth to Mary Shelley, there is a lot of aspects of Frankenstein is related to the science at the time. And the monster does not come out of magic or out of supernatural elements, but it was created by man by using various kinds of electrical experiments, electrical stimulations. That is something that was known at the time, partly because Polidori, who I mentioned, who was a physician over there, he actually knew of experiments by Galvani in Italy on, for example, giving electrical shocks to the legs of a frog, or to the frog, and the leg would twitch. So they knew that has something to do with, like, electrical current can do something to the body. Those things were there, and at the time there was this belief that maybe there is this there is something life force, that if you can give it to that, you can actually bring bodies back, or you can actually make life.
It happens in hospitals every day when they clear.
Right.
It is science. It may not bring a totally dead corpse reanimated back to life, but there is some science that it still exists to this day, then the truth there.
And that's where the fiction part comes in. Luigi Galvani, he did these experiments in 1781. So around that time, it's like, okay, where can we go with that, right? And so today, for example, Jurassic Park, you mentioned, that's an interesting example. We don't know how to sort of really bring back dinosaurs back, but we can actually see the kind of genetic manipulations that we can do, that, yeah, there is a plausibility of that.
And aren't they working on trying to bring a mammoth back and stuff like that?
Yes, and there are all these questions.
Good idea, everybody.
Right, and so
this is where fiction comes in. It's a warning.
But here is one of those things, and again, we're going to come back to the movie. Yes, there is a danger, and yes, there could be like the Jurassic Park element that they could go wild, and or they could kill you and things like that. And that is one question that a good science fiction does, which the Frankenstein, the book, does. Should we bring it back, and and the danger of that? People have compared it with the nuclear weapons, for example. Okay, so should we do that? The Oppenheimer.
Not lost on me that the biography that was based on is called American Prometheus.
That's exactly right.
Frankenstein, a modern Prometheus. This idea: are we stealing this information from a god and bringing it to man? And should we be doing this?
But there is a second component which actually people often don't focus on, which is a large part of the book and is large part of this movie by Guillermo del Toro, and that is, what is the responsibility of the person who created that, or what is the responsibility of scientists? Because the monster wants to be taken care of. He wants a companion because he's the only one here, and he wants, for example, Victor Frankenstein, who's the scientist, to create him a bride.
Hasn't he seen Bride of Frankenstein? It already happens.
And so what is the responsibility to that? So regarding the cloning aspects as well, you're mentioning about the mammoth and the others. Well, as soon as something is being created, those are endangered species because they are the only ones, or there are a couple, and that is not the right frame of mind. What is the ethical responsibility of scientists who are doing that beyond, they're going to kill us? That is just the one part of the thing. The second part is, okay, how do we take care of that? And I think that is the reason why. There is a lot of stuff in there, both in the book and the Guillermo del Toro's film, which is about that in some ways the monster is actually more pure. The monster is innocent. The monster is someone who is trying to do good, but it's the scientist, or it's the Victor Frankenstein, who is a larger problem and who is being driven by his ego and his hubris and all of those things.
I don't know who said this quote first, but I love this quote and I think about it very frequently. Knowledge is knowing that Frankenstein is not the name of the monster. Wisdom is knowing that it is.
Yeah.
This movie says this so perfectly. And the other thing is that Amherst Cinema, this has been interpreted so many different ways. Young Frankenstein is one of my favorite movies, which actually does incorporate some important elements of the book too. There is an even earlier version of the film Frankenstein that Amherst Cinema is going to show this week.
On Wednesday night, there is a screening of the 1931 version, which is considered as like one of the best versions ever. Boris Karloff, he made famous by playing Frankenstein, and again, connecting it to the new film. Guillermo del Toro says that he watched that film when he was, I think, 7 or 8, and he wanted to make a Frankenstein film since then. It's a really well done film, so do see this rescreening of this original film as well, and there is an introduction as well about the film at Amherst Cinema.
Who's doing the introduction? A mad scientist? You?
Nina Kleinberg, who's actually a film scholar, so she actually does a lot of at Amherst Cinema, provides the context of these films. That should be actually really good. But I want to bring back, before we close our conversation, to two things. One is, in this 1931 version as well, and that was the case soon after, in fact, Frankenstein was written, because the first stage play was actually performed in 1823.
So just 4 or 5 years after
it was published. But already by then, the focus was on the monster. The focus was on the horror part of the story. That was being focused rather than on Victor Frankenstein, the scientist who created that, and the challenges that brings in. And that is the issue with this original 1931 Frankenstein film, because that was based on the play. But there are a lot of other elements in both the book and the movie. And in the book, of course, it is deeply influenced by Paradise Lost. Milton's Paradise Lost, which was in the 17th century, 1667. And in fact, the epigraph to the novel actually starts with Adam asking God, "Did I request thee, Maker, from my clay to mold me, man? Did I solicit thee from darkness to promote me?" And this foundational question, which Adam asked before being expelled from paradise, is like, why did I ask to be created? And I think that is the central question in Frankenstein, the book as well, and also in Guillermo del Toro's movie. Why did you create me? That I did not ask to be created, and to suffer then through all of the things that happens. So apart from Prometheus, this is this other component to it, which connects it to religion, which connects it to larger philosophical questions. Whatever you think about the meaning of existence, how do you think about living, and so on and so forth, that's where it comes in. To me, I listened to Guillermo del Toro's interview about that on Fresh Air, in fact, and one of the things that he talked about was that for him, it's the book of Job that actually he got closer to, and he actually asked the cast members to actually read that as well, because again, that also asks the same question, why me? In the movie, not in the book, but in the movie, the monster cannot be killed or is immortal. And that plays a role as well, because he is suffering, but he doesn't have death. And that goes back to the question that we started off with. Death is also crucial. Death is also important, but the monster cannot do that. So this question of why me, why did you create me like that, actually, that plays a role in that. After all of this conversation, I should mention one last thing. I read an article by a historian, Harvard historian. She writes for The New Yorker as well. Wonderful writer, Jill Lepore. She had written an article in 2018. This was the 200th anniversary of the publication of Frankenstein. I did not know. We talk about the way we started conversation about the writing story, about these great minds in 1816 having this conversation, a challenge about writing a ghost story, and then they came up with all of these things, and then it went on to become a novel. And we talk about the birth of science fiction and Mary Shelley, and then she wrote it anonymously and things like that. Jill Lepore, when I read that, I did not know that couple of Mary Shelley's, she was 18 at the time, but a little before that, she had lost a child soon after childbirth. And she had not given the child a name because at the time, I mean, kids didn't survive that much. And so that was anonymous, that kid. And then she had a second kid and the third kid. They all died. And then she had a fourth kid that also died that was a little bit older than that. So she brings up this angle, and childbirth is in, of course, the creation of Frankenstein, but also it's part of that story as well of miscarriage, for example, and leading to the death of the mother of Victor Frankenstein. To me, that reminded me that I had read about these things about Frankenstein. I loved these stories. I had read about the birth of science fiction, but mostly from men. And we all get, oh, hey, science fiction and all of that stuff. But there is this whole other story which I had not read and which we don't hear. But of course, Jill Lepore writing about it, she's more sensitive to what is the origins of this Frankenstein? Part of the Frankenstein story actually comes from her own experiences, and her diaries were later published. So Jill Lepore actually quotes from that how she is writing about or working on reading different materials, but also thinking about the babies that she lost or she's losing. And it just goes back to this importance of different perspectives. I mean, I was just stunned by that. And the other thing that Jill Lepore brings up, which I didn't know, was that this stories were also related to emancipation debates. Both of Mary Shelley's parents actually were abolitionists. So they actually, and they were in England, but this Frankenstein, this element actually was interpreted or read from the perspective of abolitionists as well in the United States. The reason I wanted to bring it up is that this is the mark of great literature, that there are many deep interpretations of that, and those are important. And yes, go see Guillermo del Toro's version of Frankenstein because it is brilliant. And Monty, you mentioned that you cried at the end of this version, but also read the book. It is really rich, and this again reminds you, great literature. I mean, what life it has.
You could even say that Mary Shelley's Frankenstein book and everything that's come with it, it's alive. It's alive!
I feel like I should have expected you to do that, and yet somehow I was still
I didn't put
surprised.
any Mel Brooks drops in there. I only made one reference too, so I was well behaved.
Yeah, okay. Frankenstein is currently showing in select theaters locally, like Amher Cinema and The Garden in Greenfield, at least through Thursday, after which it'll move to Netflix, but we all know it'll be better if you watch it locally at a theater.
Shameless plug. But now we see how the chickens get made at Square Roots Farm with Michael Gallagher and Jake Liven of Berkshire Agricultural Ventures.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Hashi Pottery in 50 Arrow Gallery at Eastworks. Japanese-inspired ceramics and textiles, where every piece is handmade in the Pioneer Valley for home, ritual, or someone dear. HashiPottery.com. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by the UMass Amherst School of Public Policy, offering in-person and online graduate programs in public policy and data analytics. Admissions now open at umass.edu/SPP.
The weather in the Berkshires is remarkable. You know how they say if you don't like the weather in Massachusetts, wait a minute. If you don't like the weather in the Berkshires, just drive 10 minutes from where you are and it could be totally different.
I know, we just came from pouring rain in one city to like 2 towns down, and it is gorgeous.
Well, where we are in Lanesboro is another agricultural spotlight. We need to come. We should call it a local hero spotlight. No matter who we are, a local hero.
It is a local hero spotlight.
Even
it's just a different local because we have to cross the mountains to get to this local.
And technically, local hero is CISA's thing, and we're here with Berkshire Agricultural Ventures, which is in conjunction and doing the same kind of things that CISA does on the other side of the hills, which could be pouring rain right now. We don't even know.
Hi, I'm Jake Levin. I'm the local foods program manager for Berkshire Agricultural Agricultural Ventures.
Remind us what Berkshire Agricultural Ventures is, because we don't get to talk to you as much as we get to talk to CISA.
Fair enough. We work closely with CISA. Margaret Christie is one of my favorite people.
Me too.
So we are a small not-for-profit. We're based in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. We have a 3-state, 4-county service area, including the Berkshires in Massachusetts, Litchfield County in Connecticut, and Dutchess and Columbia County in New York. And we're here for our farmers. We provide technical assistance and funding solutions for farmers and other agricultural-related businesses.
Like farmers markets.
Yeah.
We talked about the market match earlier in the year.
And one of the farmers, whose land we're on right now.
I'm Michael Gallagher, and this is Square Roots Farm.
We have seen Michael Gallagher before, Khalees.
Yes.
Do you remember where?
No.
Because we've only seen him in portrait form, because in our director's wife's studio, there is a giant 6-foot tall, eerie portrait of a
chicken
farmer executing chickens.
Yeah.
I don't want to call it executing, butchering,
Processing.
whatever kind of a word you'd like to use. But
Yeah.
An amazing painting, and that's what you do day in and day out. And Julia, Tony's painting wife, was there helping to process the chickens with you, right?
Yeah, Julia helped us process for several years, and it's not exactly a day in, day out thing. We slaughter every week starting in June and going through the end of October, so we've got about one week left of slaughtering chickens. Like it's one day a week. Yeah, probably the most fun day of our week.
Wait, okay. So what is fun about processing chickens?
I mean, on a farm like ours, especially since we don't grow vegetables anymore, a lot of the things we're doing are like single-person tasks. We spend a lot of time working by ourselves, moving chicken pens or collecting eggs or doing stuff like that. But Chicken Day is a day when we get like a group of people together and do a big task together, and that feels great. You know, we slaughter in the morning, get all the chickens in the chill tank, have a really nice lunch together, come back, get them all bagged up and ready to go out the door. So it's just a nice like community event.
Like barn raising, but meat processing.
Yeah. Tell us what you're raising here at Square Root.
Yeah, we do a lot of meat chickens. We do Thanksgiving turkeys. We have a bunch of laying hens for eggs, and we do some pork and some beef as well.
Is this something that you grew up doing or something that you grew into doing?
Definitely something I grew into doing. I grew up right down the road, really 2 miles that way on the same road, and I was lucky enough to end up back here, but farming wasn't a part of what I was doing growing up at all.
What did you think you were going to do, maybe career-wise, or when you grow up, as they say?
I spent a couple years teaching after college, down in Mississippi actually, which was a different kind of place, different kind of thing. I had always been interested in sustainability and in agriculture and those kind of things, but it never seemed like something that was like a job that you could actually do. And then when I was teaching and realized that wasn't going to be a good long-term fit for me, I started finding more examples of people who were farming in ways that really resonated with me, and also in ways where it was the thing that they were doing to make a living. And I thought, if those guys can do it, maybe I can do it too.
Why farm here instead of staying in Mississippi?
Oh, this is home for me. You know, I grew up right down the road. I went to school here. I went to college here. And I left to go somewhere different and be somewhere different. And when I was gone, I said, the place that I want to be is where I came from. I'm really lucky to end up really right here. We farmed in Clarksburg for a couple of years before we were able to buy this place. And buying this place and being right in this spot is really, really lucky.
And this place and this spot is Square Roots Farm in Lanesboro. We're talking with the farmer, Michael Gallagher. Despite the fact that so many Americans eat meat, some people may be listening to this and they may have not liked the fact that we were talking so casually about slaughtering chickens. But talk about your decision to become a meat farmer.
When we started farming, we actually did a little bit of everything. We started out, and the main part of our farm was we were running a vegetable CSA. Right from the start, we were doing meat birds. And a lot of that is you hear the chicken.
You can hear them in there. They're like, don't talk about us in front of our back.
You said from the beginning we've been doing meat birds, and that chicken just started to wail.
Is that what you think of me?
I mean, for us, it was a combination of several things. One is that the land out here is really much better suited for livestock production than for vegetable production. And another is that there just weren't a lot of options out there for people to get meat that was raised in a way that they really felt good about. And so we thought we can raise meat in a way that we can feel really good about it.
Jake Levin from Berkshire Agricultural Ventures, tell us about some of the ways the Berkshires is bringing local meat to market and some of the challenges that brings to the Berkshires in particular.
As Michael's alluding to, the Berkshires have historically been a livestock agricultural place. We're not particularly well suited for growing vegetables, but we are really well suited for raising animals. The biggest issue that I've been focused on for the last almost 4 years at Berkshire Agricultural Ventures, and something that Michael's been really involved with is trying to expand processing capacity. We have the land and we have the farmers, but the real limitation is in processing, and not so much in terms of slaughter, but really in terms of the further processing, the turning those carcasses into cuts of meat and value-added products like broth or pet treats, sausages. Square Roots Farm, I think, offers a really interesting example of on-farm slaughter. I always describe Square Roots setup as sort of a unicorn. You're
slaughtering unicorns here? Can I have some of their blood? Because I hear it is good for your longevity.
Really good for you.
I don't think it works for anybody who's not a virgin.
It worked for Voldemort.
Drinking the blood of a unicorn will keep you alive even if you are an inch from death, but at a terrible price.
That's what we're really focusing on right now, is trying to expand capacity, particularly around value-added products. And Michael was part of a livestock working group that we convened, that Berkshire Agricultural Ventures convened. It was 10 members. They met every other month for about 3 years. And that was one of the topics that rose to the top, was there's really a need for more value-added production. When we talk to livestock farmers like Michael about what is it that's sitting in their walk-ins, in their coolers, and isn't moving, it's things like chicken feet, organs, bones, fat. Those are really hard to market, but when they're transformed into broth and pet treats, smoked sausages, bacon, etc., they're suddenly extremely marketable and bring more value to the farmer. And it's where the market trends are really, really heading. So for parents of young kids like me and Michael, we care about getting good food, but we don't necessarily have the 2 hours after a work day to make chili. But if we could buy a quart of chili with homemade, local raised beef, that would be amazing. So we are working with processors throughout Western Mass, Hudson Valley, Connecticut, to expand those opportunities for livestock farmers here in the Berkshires.
If you make stock at home and you are not putting chicken feet in it, you're missing out. They have gelatin in them. They make your stock unctuous in a way that really improves everything you're going to use that stock for.
So you're processing chickens, Michael Gallagher, here at Square Roots Farm, on the farm. If you don't do it on the farm yourself, where do you have to take the meat you're raising to now? I know a lot of the farmers we talk to on the other side of the mountain have to go to Athol.
Or for chicken, it's Reed's.
Which is pretty new. Reed's Farm doing the processing there is a kind of a new endeavor.
Yeah, where they're only doing poultry. You're processing chickens, but you're raising beef and pork. Where does that get processed?
When we started, there were really no options for USDA inspected poultry slaughter in Massachusetts. I actually don't think there are still yet any options, but Reed is getting close.
Yeah.
Nice. Way to go, Cat Chang.
Yes. Way to go, Cat Chang.
So when we started, the only place we could have gone was to Rhode Island, and that wasn't going to be a good fit for us. So that's why we ended up doing it on our own. And there are more options now. We could go to Reed now. We could go out to Morning Star in Fort Plain, New York. That's like 2 hours. But that's where you could go if you weren't doing it on farm. And in terms of our larger animals that we're not allowed to do on farm, the pork and the beef, that all goes to Eagle Bridge in New York. And we're really...
How far away is that?
That is like an hour on the dot with a trailer, no matter how fast.
Somebody who's probably done it a bunch of times.
Exactly.
Exactly.
You can't get there any faster, no matter how hard you try. But they're fantastic, and I don't know what we would do without them.
If we are about an hour from Northampton, and Northampton's probably about an hour from Athol, if there was some place that was half an hour between Northampton and Lanesboro, that might be something that would be amenable to people that are farming in the valley and people that are farming and wanting animals slaughtered in the Berkshires. Jake Levin from Berkshire Agricultural Ventures, are there any proposed locations, any movement of a place that might be the place that could literally kill two birds with one stone?
No, and it's such a complicated question. So we've been working really closely with Reed Farm to help them get their USDA grant and inspection and start working under that, which hopefully will happen this winter. We're really excited about that. That's going to be huge. We've also worked really closely with the family that owns Adams Farm in Athol, Mass.
I will, full disclosure, picked up a quarter of a cow last week.
I love seeing all these women-owned processing facilities in our region, which is really unusual. But we've done a lot of research and done work on top of other research that's been done, like that Margaret Christie did for CISA. And the real challenge is slaughterhouses, because of USDA regulation and the needs for equipment and utilities and everything else, the startup cost is so high. So we're talking usually $2 to $5 million. The margins are so slim. And currently, when you look at how many animals are on the ground, we have enough slaughterhouses to support what exists. Mm-hmm. And so supporting a new slaughterhouse feels like a really risky venture, when what we could be doing and have been doing is working with the existing slaughterhouses to expand their capacity. We are unusual in that we have as many slaughterhouses as we do in the region. I know it sounds like driving an hour, 2 hours is a lot. That's pretty typical for a small-scale farmer anywhere in this country, and in fact, we have better access than most places. One of the critical challenges is most farmers are sending their livestock all at the same time of year, which is right now. And that's when the bottleneck is. But you talk to someone at Adams Farm in Athol, Mass, or Reed Farm in January or February, and they're hemorrhaging. You know, they don't have enough throughput. They are faced with the dilemma: do they lay off their staff and risk not being able to rehire them once they get busy, or do they keep them on the books and pay them even though they don't have the throughput? So it's a really tricky thing. And again, that's why we're focused on expanding value-added production, and there are some exciting opportunities on the horizon around that, directly here in the Berkshires and in the Pioneer Valley, which I can't really say much more about, but come back to me in a year or two.
Okay, good. Michael from Square Roots Farm, do people come to you with ethical quandaries and complaints? Do you face that as a farmer and somebody who's processing chickens on the farm?
We have had in the past people on social media who, activist vegans who say that we're terrible people for killing animals. But more often what we get is, I remember one time we had a guy come, he said, "When are you slaughtering chickens?" And I told him, and he said, "Can I come and slaughter one? Because I really want to understand what it is that's happening when I'm eating meat. I want to experience the process all the way through if I'm going to continue eating meat." And we have a lot more of that, of people who are really wanting to understand what it is, wanting to understand the whole process, wanting to understand if that's a process that they want to be a part of or not. For me, I'm really happy to talk to those people. I'm much happier to talk to those people than people who want to ignore whatever the process is. And I've had experiences of that too, where people say, "I don't want to buy your chicken because I know it was a chicken. I just want to buy chicken at the grocery store." And people who want to not see, but we're really happy to work with and provide food for people who want to see and understand what the whole process was and know that it's a process that they can feel good about.
It's interesting because chicken is one of the only ones that we don't have a euphemism for. Chicken on the ground walking around is chicken, and chicken on your plate is chicken.
Yeah.
But when my, at the time, 5-year-old said we were having cow for dinner, my mom almost lost her mind. She just did not want to accept the fact that this used to be a cow. It's beef, it's steak, it's whatever one you want to call it. But that is the reality of it, and I think that's what's important about knowing your farmers and coming to ask questions to your farmers and being around the animals. We probably, almost definitely, as U.S. Americans, eat too much meat.
Yes.
But if you are eating meat, get to know the farmer, get to know how it's done, and know where your meat comes from. Speaking of,
she's so curious about us.
There's a chicken walking behind us that is still living. Good thing it's Halloween week. It's like headless chicken walking. It would be perfect.
Wasn't there a headless chicken in Colorado that ended up being mayor?
Yeah, I don't know what happened. they do walk around a little bit if you do that, right?
We've
entered the zombie part of the show.
Our setup. When I don't know how much you want to hear about when
They're in the
when
hood
we're
upside
slaughtering.
down?
Yeah, they're in a cone upside down.
Yeah. All that being said, if we wanted to get your meat from Square Roots Farm, where is that meat available?
We have a small self-serve farm stand. You can get it right here. We also have a website you can order online for pickup or home delivery. We do home delivery every Thursday from Williamstown to Great Barrington. And we do 2 farmers markets. We do the farmers market in North Adams, and we do the farmers market in Pittsfield. And both of those are starting up once a month for the winter inside in November.
Are you incubating eggs on site for your laying hens or your meat chickens?
So we are not incubating any chicks. A hatchery is not a business we want to be in. We're fortunate to work with a hatchery out of Pennsylvania that does a delivery route out this way. Every other week during the summer, we go down and meet a guy in a van in the McDonald's parking lot off the Pike.
I'll take some
and pick
chicken
up a bunch of
McNuggets.
chicks. So literally in the McDonald's parking lot, he pulls in his van, I pull him in my van, I take 400 chicks from his van, put them in my van, and bring them back here.
Maybe that's the only time real chicken has been at McDonald's.
I mean,
that is entirely
That was a joke, McDonald's. Don't sue us.
because it's one of the other bottlenecks of this industry, especially like poultry raising, is that there aren't any hatcheries in the state. I'm not sure if there are hatcheries in New England, so all of those chickens that are being raised here all have to come from somewhere else.
We used to get our chicks in the mail, and I love the post office, and for the most part they did a really good job, but once a year basically we would have boxes that didn't show up on time or that we couldn't find. Just the process of being in the mail for a couple of days was fairly hard on the chicks. We didn't know better until we could get them right from the hatchery, and when we got them right from the hatchery, they just did so much better.
Michael Gallagher from Square Roots Farm here in Lanesboro. Where'd the name Square Roots Farm come from?
I used to be a math teacher, and so when we were getting ready to start the farm, we had our lease in place, and we still didn't have a name. And I was had a long-term sub gig as a math teacher at that point, and one of the other math teachers said, "How about Square Roots Farm?" And I said, "That sounds great."
It's perfect.
And it's a great fit for us because it just feels like here's a farm that they don't take themselves too seriously. They make math jokes, and that feels like a good fit for us.
You're doing division here of animal parts. This, as an aside, we mentioned that Julia did this wonderful portrait of you that we saw. What was it like? I've never had anybody paint a gorgeous portrait of me like that, and it's a huge, like almost life-size painting. What was that experience like for you?
It was really easy for me. She said, "Stand here, hold this," and then she took a picture of me. And then she worked mostly from the photograph, so I didn't have to stand still for a long time, which is great because I would not have been good at that at all. But then seeing it was kind of wild. I saw it when it was up in the Berkshire Museum. It was just really cool to see. She's super skillful, and yeah, it was awesome.
Talk about the benefit of having livestock for the land itself.
For us, I mean, the livestock are a really important part of how we manage the land and manage the nutrients on the land. Our farm does a lot of animal movement.
Oh, you mean like manure?
Yeah, we're moving animals, and the animals are spreading their manure over the farm. Like we move our cows every day to a fresh piece of grass. So they're here, then they're gone, the grass gets a chance to recover, and they get to spread their fertility in a new area. And the chickens, the meat chickens, we move their pens every day. We just drag them forward 1 pen length. So they forage, they put down the manure, and then the next day they're in a new place. So they're out of their own manure, they're not hanging out in poop, which is great for the chickens. And the grass gets this like big shot of fertility, and it gets like a rest time to like take that up and use it to grow stronger root systems and more grass for the cows when the cows come back through.
Chickens hanging out in their own poop is one of the many ways you get salmonella, folks.
Absolutely.
Jake Levin, you've told us what you can't tell us about the future of meat processing and added value for meat farmers and for the community that wants to support them and eat that. But what can you tell us? What's exciting on the horizon that you can tell us about what Berkshire Agricultural Ventures is doing, particularly in regards to raising local meat?
You sort of teed it up perfectly. I think one of the things I'm most excited about is what's going to happen with Reed Farm once they go under USDA. It's going to be a game changer for farmers, not just in Western Massachusetts, but all of New England. There are just not that many USDA processing facilities in the region who are willing to provide what we call custom or fee-for-service processing for small scale and medium-sized farmers. We're also working closely with Kate Stillman of Stillman Quality Meats, who is also about to go under USDA and start doing some co-packing. She makes incredible meatballs and meat pies and sausages. And so to be able to see her apply that skill and those recipes she's developed for other farmers is really exciting. We're heading into the winter season, so really excited for the winter farmers markets and start to put the grants out to the farmers markets for that. We're also trying to see what we can do to bring more local meat into our public school system, so working really closely with Mass Farm to School, which I know you guys just interviewed. I know, I saw Abby post about that. They're amazing partners, and so it's really exciting to work with them to see how we might be able to bring some local meat into our public school systems. It's an uphill battle for sure, but want to keep plugging away on that.
So now we're under the shed where the quote-unquote magic happens.
We come out first thing in the morning. They go in the cones upside down. We kill them there, collect the blood because it goes in the compost with all the feathers and the guts. They move into the scalder. That turns them through hot water to loosen their feathers. They go in the plucker here, which is like a washing machine with big rubber fingers. They spin around in there and it takes off like 99% of the feathers. Then they come out here. We take off the heads and feet, take off the neck, and then take out all the guts, save the hearts and livers because people want to eat those. And then they go in the chill tank with the ice.
How many chickens have you processed this year, do you know?
Yeah, we're on track to do about 6,000 chickens this year.
Wow, that's a lot. That's way more than I would have imagined.
People like chicken.
Yeah. It tastes like everything.
Thanks a lot to Square Roots Farm for having us in the beautiful Berkshires.
Find out more about them at squarerootsfarm.org.
And you can check them out at the Farmers Market in Pittsfield and North Adams throughout the course of the winter. On the next Fabulous 413, we'll meet the challenger for the mayoral seat in North Adams, Scott Berglund, and hear his vision for the leadership of that city and more.
We'll learn some of the ghost stories of Berkshire County at the Pittsfield Cemetery with the Berkshire Historical Society.
And we'll chat with the band Autumn Defense before you can catch them at the Iron Horse tomorrow night.
I'm Kali Smith.
I'm Monty Belmonte.
We'll talk with you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.